Laughter isn't always joy. In 1962, it became a virus. Children laughed until they collapsed. Schools shut down. Adults lost control. Doctors had no answers. This wasn't funny. This wasn't entertainment. This was the Tanganyika laughter epidemic, a real psychological outbreak that spread fear and chaos and exposed how fast the human mind can break. Subscribe and support Dark Decoded X. 2 deep investigations every week. Share where you're watching from in the comments. Seeing our growing community from around the world always brings me purpose. Now, let the investigation begin. The first laugh. Kashasha Mission Boarding School, a quiet village near Lake Victoria. 3 girls start laughing during lessons. Teachers dismiss it as mischief. But the laughter doesn't stop. It intensifies, spreads. By afternoon, dozens of students are convulsing with uncontrollable fits, crying, screaming, and laughing until they collapse. Parents arrive to find their children unable to speak, unable to breathe properly, lost in waves of involuntary hysteria. Within days, 95 of the school's 159 students are affected. The school shuts down on March 18th. Students are sent home. But the mystery of the Tanganyika laughter epidemic was just beginning. Because when those students returned to their villages, they didn't return alone. They brought the laughter with them. How laughter became a weapon. Village after village fell. Nshamba, Ramashenye, Bukoba. The pattern was identical. Adolescents first, then adults. Victims described overwhelming anxiety before the laughter seized them. Racing hearts, dizziness, uncontrollable muscle spasms. Some laughed for hours, others for days. The Tanganyika laughter epidemic of 1962 forced the closure of 14 schools. Over 1,000 people were affected across 6 months. Entire communities were paralyzed. Medical teams found no virus, no toxin, no pathogen. Blood tests revealed nothing. X-rays showed healthy lungs. Yet the victims couldn't stop. They would laugh until their bodies gave out, then collapse into exhaustion, only to wake and laugh again. And the most disturbing part? It only affected certain people, and scientists couldn't understand why. The victim's nightmare. Imagine laughing until your ribs ache, until your throat bleeds, until you're begging it to stop, but your body won't obey. Victims of the Tanganyika laughter epidemic of 1962, when an entire region couldn't stop laughing, described it as agony. Respiratory distress, fainting spells, flatulence, rashes, crying fits that morphed into laughter without warning. Some experienced violent outbursts, others became catatonic between episodes. Parents restrained their children, husbands tied down their wives. Nothing worked. The laughter always returned. Witnesses described the sound, not joyful but shrill, mechanical, wrong. One doctor wrote, "Their faces showed terror, not happiness. And here's what made it even more haunting. Almost all victims were female, young, and had one thing in common. The pattern emerges. The victims shared a profile, mostly girls aged 12 to 18. Female teachers, young women in positions of stress, almost no men, almost no young children. Horror stories about the laughter epidemic in Tanganyika reveal a disturbing pattern. Nearly all attended Christian mission schools. Most came from communities undergoing rapid social change, traditional structures collapsing under colonial pressure, new education systems imposing foreign values, and families torn between old and new. These girls lived in constant cultural conflict. Psychologists later identified this as the key. Mass psychogenic illness, formerly called mass hysteria, targets populations under extreme psychological stress. But here's the question no one wanted to ask. What kind of stress could literally break someone's mind until they laughed themselves unconscious? The dark truth behind the laughter. Tanganyika had just gained independence from Britain 1 year earlier. But freedom on paper didn't erase generations of trauma. Mission schools enforced strict European discipline on African children. Girls faced impossible expectations, obey colonial authorities, abandon traditional customs, suppress emotions, and perform perfectly. Any deviation meant punishment. The untold story of the laughter epidemic reveals what doctors missed. These girls had no outlet, no voice, no control over their lives or futures. Western psychologists called it mass hysteria, but some researchers now argue it was a collective psychological breaking point, a physical manifestation of suppressed trauma, fear, and cultural erasure. The body does what the voice cannot. It screams through laughter, and once one girl's body found that release, others unconsciously followed. Doctors couldn't stop the madness. Colonial doctors tried everything: sedatives, isolation, exorcisms when families demanded them. Nothing worked. What caused the Tanganyika laughter epidemic became the question that haunted medical journals for decades. Some doctors blamed primitive African psychology. Others suggested mass poisoning. A few whispered about supernatural causes. All were wrong. The epidemic only stopped when schools remained closed long enough for the psychological trigger to fade, when the stressful environment was removed. By June 1962, new cases dropped. By late summer, the laughter finally died. Over 1,000 people had been affected, families destroyed, communities traumatized, and the medical establishment learned something terrifying. The mind can turn the body against itself in ways science still doesn't fully understand. Stress spread like a virus. Mass psychogenic illness is real. It's documented, and it's more common than you think. When groups face extreme stress, especially young people in rigid hierarchies, the unconscious mind can trigger physical symptoms as an escape mechanism. The epidemic of 1962 wasn't unique. Similar outbreaks occurred in textile factories, convents, and schools worldwide. Dancing plagues in medieval Europe, fainting epidemics in Cambodian factories, twitching outbreaks in New York schools. All followed the same pattern: vulnerable population, severe stress, and one person's symptom becomes a social contagion. The brain is so powerful that belief alone can create real physical illness. Once someone sees another person's symptom, their brain can unconsciously replicate it. But here's what makes Tanganyika different and more disturbing. Why this epidemic still matters today. The Tanganyika laughter epidemic ended, but its cause never disappeared. Today we see the same patterns: TikTok tic disorders, social media-induced anxiety contagions, mass fainting at concerts. The mechanism hasn't changed, only the medium. We're still a species that absorbs stress collectively, that unconsciously mirrors others' pain. The girls of Tanganyika weren't hysterical or primitive. They were human beings pushed past their breaking point by systems that demanded their silence. Their laughter was the only language their trauma could speak. And the most chilling part? We still create environments, such as schools, workplaces, and social media, that apply the same psychological pressure. We've learned nothing. The laughter could return. Perhaps it already has. We now refer to it by a different name. If this investigation opened your eyes, like, subscribe, hit that bell, share widely, and watch the next documentaries pinned on the end screen. We laugh because we're happy, but sometimes we laugh because we're breaking. The girls of Tanganyika didn't choose their laughter, it chose them. How many people around you are silently screaming through smiles? How close are we all to our own epidemic? What happens when the pressure finally breaks you?